Actually, I personally am feeling like I've been waiting to make this Venetian series forever, but that's cool. Thanks, Taylor, you do you. So anyway, get ready, because this is the history of the Venetian Hotel and Casino, Las Vegas, Nevada. Constructed in 1997 and opened in 1999, the Venetian Hotel is the largest hotel complex in America and the second largest hotel complex in the entire world, boasting over 7,000 luxurious rooms and...
Dude.
What?
You're supposed to be making a video about the Venetian Republic. You know, the one with all the history that's actually in Venice.
Oh, right. Okay.
You do know about the Venetian Republic, right?
Yeah, of course. Pfft, duh, I mean, come on.
Dude!
Right, history, on it. Sorry, right, history. I'll do that.
Three hours later.
Right, the Venetian Republic, La Serenissima Repubblica di Venezia, clocking in at an astounding 1,100 years. This is the longest continuous government in history. Not even Rome had one unified state with one form of government for anywhere near that long. You have to give credit to the state that existed since before even Beowulf was written, and survived through the golden age of piracy well into the Enlightenment. Now, since this is a huge span of time, and even I get confused by it, I'm throwing a century counter in the bottom corner, so with that, let us dive into the history of the Venetian Republic. We know that Rome had the unfortunate fate of being doubly sacked, once by some wimpy Visigoths in 410 and once by some very not wimpy Vandals in 455. The 400s and onward saw droves of various barbaric tribes swarming in from the north. Note, barbarian is not a derogatory term. It's a blanket term that the Romans and Greeks used to describe anyone who simply didn't speak their language. In many instances, their culture and technology was just as developed as that of the Romans, and in some cases, millennia ahead of their time. The following few centuries saw Zerg rush after Zerg rush of tribes flowing in and settling down. For more on why Rome got so wrecked, M8, give a listen to this here podcast. The tribe that we care about the most here are the Lombards, who, if the Italian roots of their name are any indication, had very long beards. When the Byzantine Emperor Justinian tried to do his whole reconquer the old Western Empire thing in the early 500s, and ended up doing little more than just trashing the Italian peninsula and most of North Africa, it was reconquered by the Goths, or deconquered, I suppose, and then Justinian came back again, and by that point there was little worth reconquering since his army was so undisciplined. They did about as good a job of saving the West as Team America did when they saved Paris that one time. So, Italy is more or less a ruined no man's land, which made it fantastically easy for the Lombards to invade northern Italy in 568. We don't have exact records of the founding of the city, but legends suggest that people started living in Venice in the early 5th century as a trading post and fishing village of sorts, with refugees from various nearby and recently sacked cities coming to live on the islands as time went on. The biggest ones are Padova, Treviso, and Aquileia, who, when the Lombards came around a century later, collectively looked around at the status of their walls and decided, no, and moved to a more easily defensible position on the islands. The situation was dire, so they made like Nicias during the Sicilian expedition by taking up residence on what would have amounted to a large sandbar in the middle of a swampy lagoon with some houses on it. However, the benefit was they didn't need to build Lombard-proof walls out of dumb materials like stone and other stone. No, these guys were real geniuses because they made the water do the hard work. The Lombard Navy was still experimenting with rubber ducky technology, so there was effectively no chance of the island being properly invaded by anyone. Venice is a real Cinderella story because they took a patch of land about as inviting as the modern equivalent of Mars and turned it into one of the most beautiful and long-lasting cities in the world. You hear that, Mars? Give us 1,000 years or so and you'll be the hottest tourist destination this side of the Milky Way. We might even build a casino or two. No, bad, Blue, bad. No casinos, no gambling. Get it together. So we have a city and we've poured people into that city, and now we get to just sit back and poke it with a stick while asking it to do history things. After Justinian's death and that whole triple reconquering nonsense, pockets of Italy belonged to the Exarchate of Ravenna under the Byzantine Empire. Effectively, what Justinian managed to keep from the West became its own state under the authority of the Byzantines. The Exarchate had hands in early Venetian government but didn't quite control it. The rest of Italy was split into various states, most ruled by Lombards, which would stay separated until the 1800s. This was the climate the Venetians came out of. It's about as constructive an early childhood environment to start in as being raised out of a dumpster in Chernobyl a month after everyone curiously moved out. But those Venetians, man, they made it work. According to John the Deacon, who wrote around the year 1000, the date on which the Republic was born is 697, when the Venetians supposedly elected Paolo Luciano Festo as Doge, which is the Italian word for the Latin dukes, from which we also get the English duke. The story's a bit fishy for a few reasons, and it's suspected that this Paolo fellow was actually an exarch named Paul, who was deposed for refusing to comply with the Byzantine Emperor Leo III's policy of iconoclasm, and he left the exarchate to come to Venice. Whatever the case with him is, the first historical doge we're sure of is Orso. Now, the doge is unlike the dukes from nobility that you may be imagining, in that the doge was elected, not born from weird nobility. Our buddy Orso here was such a stand-up guy that Leo III over in Byzantium gave him 2 thumbs up in the Byzantine Empire's consent to rule over Venice. Venice was self-governing, but safe to say they kept their friendly neighborhood Byzantines on speed dial. Orso's son Teodato became doge after him in an attempt to pull a Rome and start a dynasty, but it failed and none of the subsequent doges established any, though many had tried to start dynasties. The doge would remain an elected position. Under Teodato's tenure, the budding Venetian Republic became the last remaining Byzantine-affiliated state, as the Byzantine Exarchate was unceremoniously yoinked by the Lombards. I swear, you look the other way to check your email for like 5 seconds and invaders have murdered your ruler and stolen your land. Every time! At this point, Venice was effectively an independent state, so it had all the freedom in the world to watch grown-up TV and eat dessert first. You know, adult stuff. Without its explicit Byzantine connection, Venice had a minor identity crisis as citizens split up into various factions to express support for either staying close to the Byzantines, allying with the Franks, allying with the Lombards even, or staying independent. All the while, refugees from the fallen exarchate poured into Venice and development in the lagoon boomed, as did the construction of an early fleet. Domenico Monegario, who expanded Venice outward into a local trade center and maritime power, was the first doge to be subject to the veto power of 2 annually elected tribunes. The tribunes were put in place to keep up relations with both the Franks and the Byzantines. Domenico was deposed as a result of not playing nice with those tribunes. Mental note here, most of the doges at this point have been deposed by means of blinding and exile, so if you're planning on being doge, my advice is to invest in some Kevlar sunglasses. Now, after Domenico came Maurizio Galbaio, the first great doge, who, though I'll dock him points for appointing his son as doge after him, expanded into the nearby Rialto Islands and catapulted Venice into a position of international prominence for the first time ever. Him and his son quarreled with the Frankish king Charlemagne over the Adriatic slave trade in which Venice participated. After Maurizio and his son Giovanni, the pro-Charlemagne Obelerio degli Antenori stepped in and did a lot to ruffle the feathers of the pro-Byzantine and pro-independent factions. Byzantine and Frankish ships ended up clashing with each other in the lagoon, which resulted in a Frankish siege of Venice at the prompting of Obelerio in an attempt to prop up his wavering power. The costly Frankish siege failed, and Agnello Participazio held the Republic against them, earning him a gold Participazio star and his election as Doge in 811. The demonstration of resistance against the Frankish siege asserted the independence of the Venetian Republic. Those water walls really went to good use there, and that is 200 years of excellent foresight. With our independent Venetian state secured, we'll push forward in the next episode towards the Middle Ages as the city takes on its modern form. Ci vediamo dopo.